And I could see within his eyes that he was there to stay. He was faithful as a brother. He was faithful as a friend, looking for a lasting city, faithful to the end. Even when the road grew rugged and the sky turned black, trusting in his King, he had no thought of turning back. In the midst of persecution, with his dying breath, he magnified the one who kept him faithful unto death. He was faithful as a brother. He was faithful as a friend, looking for a lasting city, faithful to the end, looking for a lasting city, faithful to the end.
Welcome again to Plain Talk about life in the Bible. If you've been following along, or if this is your first time, we're glad to have you. If you have any questions or comments, please contact me. Email seems to be the easiest for people. Although I did get a call this past week from somebody who was watching it late at night in a hospital room in Springfield, and she wasn't as pleased with my take on earthly mindedness. She kind of wanted to have her goods here and in heaven too, and I tried to say, well, there's treasures supposed to be in heaven, and the ones here I wouldn't get too attached to, or God will take them away from you. Well, that wasn't very pleasing to her. But I appreciated her call anyway, and we're going to sit down and talk about these things because they are life-changing, aren't they? If you change your thoughts, you'll change your life. We're returning to Samson, chapter 14 of the book of Judges. We're going to catch Samson. Last week, as it ended, I was lamenting the fact that Samson chose this Philistine woman, which he had no business doing. But he insisted that his mother and father get that woman for me. She pleases me. She was looking good to his eye, and Samson didn't care about anything else, and he'll pay the price for not caring about anything else. Behind all of this, though, Samson's doing a sinful thing here. He's attracted to this woman. She has no character. She will prove it to him. She's a Philistine woman, a worshiper of a deity that doesn't exist. He has no business being yoked to her. But the whole time, God does have a plan. God permits Samson, providentially, to chase this woman that he shouldn't have been chasing. Why? God's ready to deliver Israel from under the bondage of these oppressive and very wicked Philistines. In Samson's time, the scripture actually says he'll begin to deliver the Israelites. Now, the reason he says that is because unlike other periods in the Judges where a judge is raised, let's say like Jephthah or Gideon, and you'll see that they actually throw off the yoke of oppression, and for a period of years they have freedom. In this case, the Philistines are going to continue to be a vexation to the Israelites for some time. Samuel will deal with them after our man Samson is gone. And finally, David will subdue them when he kills Goliath later when he's a boy. The Philistines are still vexing Israel, but you'll see that David is sort of the conqueror finally of the Philistines, and the Philistines are never the same again. Never troublers the same way again. But for now, we see this passage where it says that Samson sent his mother and father to acquire this wife, this Philistine wife for him. And now he's gone home and he comes back again, and surprise, 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 a young lion attacks him. And Samson doesn't have anything to fight back with, so he uses his hands, and he finds the Spirit of the Lord has come upon him. And he rips the lion to shreds with his bare hands. Now that surprises Samson, the attack and the strength. And it seems as what's really happening is that God's giving him a sampling, preparing him for what he's going to later do to the Philistines, to show him that God is indeed with him and that he has this special gift of strength that he'll use not just to free himself from the Philistine oppression, but to free all of Israel. Because that's the reason that God raised him up, was to free the nation of Israel from this oppression, God's peculiar people. Now, he doesn't tell anybody about this encounter with the lion. And what you're going to find is he comes back another time and he finds that the carcass is still there. And inside the carcass, there's a honeycomb of some sort, of a beehive, and he with full of honey and bees, I suppose. But after you've killed a lion, I don't think you worry about the bees too much. And it's reminiscent of the same way that God exhibited his future strength to David. If you remember, David kills, when he's a shepherd, a lion and a bear. Why? God's preparing him for future service and showing him that he's going to be endowed with certain strengths. We should probably look for those signs in our lives. If God's given you a particular success, let's say, in dealing with people in Bible studies or in business groups or something like that, you ought to cast your eyes around and see if God isn't preparing you to do the same thing, maybe on a larger or more permanent scale in the future. We ought to think like that after reading these stories. Now, he doesn't tell anybody, neither his mother or his father. Verse 7, he says of chapter 4, then he went down and talked with the woman. She pleased him. After some time, when he returned to get her, he turned to see the carcass. He goes through this little thing. And then he doesn't tell him that he took the honey out of the carcass. And this becomes an important part of the story. Now, he's going to have a wedding feast. It's going to last 7 days. He goes to this foreign land, to the Philistines. They're oppressors, right across the border. And the Philistines are kind enough, or in this case, unkind enough, to give him 30 companions, 30 groomsmen for his wedding. So they're going to have a week-long feast. He's got 30 new friends that he has nothing in common with. And so what happens is, in verse 12, he says to him, let me pose a riddle to you. So he's going to make a little riddle with him, and he makes a bet. I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing if you can do this. If you can explain my riddle to me, he says, I'm going to reward you with 30 pieces of clothing. But if you cannot explain to me, you give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. So they agree. So they say, let us hear it. So he says, out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong, something sweet. Okay? Well, these guys are perplexed by it. They're thinking about it. They can't figure it out. They've got the rest of the week to find a solution, but they just can't figure it out. So what do? Well, remember, these are Philistines. And I want you to know that when I say Philistines like that, I mean they're going to be disreputable, unreliable, wicked people. The kind that you might meet sitting at any lunchroom cafeteria table, or perhaps at P.J. Kelly's bar. Eben, if you're listening again, look up and down the bar. If you think you can trust everybody at that bar, you've got a bar full of Philistines. I wouldn't trust them. They might look all right outwardly, but they're Philistines at heart. So be sure you don't become too close of friends with them. Now, for 3 days they couldn't figure it out, these 30 guys. So here's what they did. Came to pass on the 7th day, they said to Samson's wife, entice your husband that he may explain the riddle to us, or else. Now, these are Philistines talking to a Philistine woman who's just been married. And they come to her and they say, we don't want to lose this bet. We don't want to have to give him 30 changes of clothing. Either tell us, find out somehow what the answer to this riddle is, or we're going to come and burn your house down with you and your dad in it. Now there's a Philistine for you. They're going to come and burn the house down. They threaten her. Why? Because they don't want to lose a bet. So, remember, she's a Philistine also. So what does she do? She goes and starts this nagging Samson. Listen to this. This is just... So she says to Samson, she wept on him. You hate me. You don't love me. Oh my God. You're thinking about this time. Surely Samson's sorry he married her. Samson's not that smart. Okay? He's just not that smart. You're thinking he's going to tell her just to shut up He doesn't want to be nagged to death. No, he's not that smart. Remember what I told you? He only cares about one thing. She's looking good. She's looking real good to him. She's a bimbo, and she's got nothing to commend her to him. No problem for Samson. You do not love me. You have posed a riddle, but you have not even explained it to me. So Samson says, hey, listen, honey, I haven't even explained it to my mom and dad. I'm not leaving you out of the loop. I haven't even explained it to them. You hate me. She starts that routine again. Unbelievable. Look at it. Now she had wept on him the 7 days while the feast lasted. It happened on the 7th day that he told her, because she pressed him so much. She nagged him for 7 days, and it worked. He tells her the answer to the riddle. And what does she do immediately? I told you she's a Philistine. When you're a Philistine, you're going to do the wrong thing. She does absolutely the wrong thing, turns around, sells him out, explains to the friends, who have threatened to burn her alive, by the way, that the answer to the riddle is he took honey out of the carcass of a lion. Unbelievable. So the men of the city said to him on the 7th day when the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey and what is stronger than a lion? And he says these words that I think are funny. He says, somebody's been plowing with my heifer. Actually, he was pretty descriptive of her, I think. But he meant somebody had used undue influence. I think that was the kind of plowing he's talking about. But think about it. Somebody's been plowing with my heifer. You wouldn't have solved my riddle. Now the story, he's upset. He's angry with these guys. Why? Well, they've duped him. They've lied to him. They've won the bet by a backhanded sort of strategy. He certainly should be mad at her. He is, actually, a little, it seems. And he's angry at all of these. And behind all this, the providence of God is provoking Samson, whose anger is pretty fiery, you'll see throughout the story, to do what? God's about to throw off the yoke of the Philistines, and he does it by this personal confrontation between the Philistines and Samson. And when we're talking about the Philistines in your life and in mine, be careful who you're yoked to in business. Be careful who you're yoked to in friendship, especially in marriage. And sometimes when you suffer at the hands of a Philistine, the one thing it's supposed to do is drive you to your knees and drive you back to God. That's what it should do for you. If it would do that for you, it would be a blessing to you. If the world mistreats you so bad, if your business partner steals from you, maybe you'll learn not to trust business partners. They're all Philistines unless they're Christian. They're Philistines. They can't be trusted. That's the lesson we're supposed to learn in this. But instead, Samson does something that you're never going to suspect. He goes to a nearby village. He finds a feast going on there. He finds 30 Philistines having a feast. He kills them, strips them of their clothes, returns to Timnah, and says to the 30 guys, you've won your bet. Here's your payment. He gives them the clothes, probably the bloody clothes, of the victims he's just slain in the next town up the road. Now, if you could have guessed that was coming, you're a little brighter than the average Bible student. Now, when we come back, you're going to find Samson should have learned his lesson about Philistine women. Do you think he has? No. No, he won't have learned it because he's like you and me. She's still looking good to him.